starting recording. I think it says that on the thing. Cool. And then, well, this is a one-time code, right? So everything's fine.
Well, they still have to know your actual password as well to leverage.
All right.
Presumably.
So we have a lot to talk about today, but I think we want to do exactly what we did last time, which is definitely give you guys a chance to have plenty of time to tell us what it is that's going on with you and where you're expecting stuff from us and not seeing it, or where you're confused about our future direction, and so on and so forth. So we definitely want to give you guys plenty of time to talk about that. Until then, we're going to give you a bit of an update on where we're at with the project. So as many of you know, we launched a beta release 13 days ago. And as you would expect, we've got another one coming out here in a week, roughly the 21st, so about 3 weeks.
The milestones, I believe we do set the dates on those things.
So Steve is referring to the milestones here, and if we did everything right, then there is a June 21st date, right? So that's when you can reasonably expect the next one coming out. So Bruce, do you want to speak at all to the Ampersand support that we enabled here?
Well, we've enabled it.
We've enabled it, yes.
Try it out, provide feedback. It builds on top of the existing PowerShell jobs mechanism, so it's not the same as Ampersand on normal Unix, but it is the best reasonable approximation that I could come up with for this behavior.
Yeah, so this is just a very, for those of you not familiar with the shell semantic on Linux, you basically just append a trailing ampersand, and that's going to fork the process.
What it's going to do is create a PowerShell background job.
That's what this does,
Yeah,
but the typical shell semantic is to
It'll be a background.
Create a background process.
Yeah.
And the shell continues to run in the foreground. That's one of the things that's the background foreground controls aren't available for this, so you can't foreground a backgrounded process. Currently you have to use wait job, receive job.
Right. We also, I don't believe we support any of the standard shortcuts like Control Z, right?
No, we don't support job control at all.
Right.
I believe Control Z would send PowerShell itself.
The background.
Got it. That still works.
Yeah, we don't currently process Control Z, so weird things happen. That is something that we should fix in the future.
Yes.
We should at least catch Control Z.
Yeah, so it's just an area where we've enabled a feature here that has many potential design quirks or areas where we might want to receive some feedback. So definitely please play with that. Just want to make sure nothing in the chat here. So anyway, future stuff. You guys have all been playing with this for 2 weeks already. You know about this. So just quickly, our labels right now. So the milestones here. So we're basically looking at, we've got 4 6.0 milestones right now. I know this is kind of exploding. Basically, the bucket that you should be looking at is this high priority bucket. This is what we feel is absolutely necessary in order to ship a 6.0 release candidate at some point in the future. So this would be something that we said might actually be ready for release. This is subject to change, obviously. We've been adding new stuff here. We've got a few tasks that we know we still need to generate, but ultimately we think that this roughly encompasses all the stuff that we want to make sure goes out with 6.0.
Just to be clear, this is the list of stuff that we're aware of.
Yes.
So as you continue to use PowerShell Core 6 betas, and you find issues that you believe are kind of blockers for the 6.0 release, do CC Joey and myself, and we'll definitely take a look at those, and we can triage and decide whether it's going to be a blocker for 6.0 release candidate or not.
Yeah, as we've been talking about, this is very much a living, sort of milestone. So we do take feedback in real time to reprioritize this. Similarly, the 6.0 pending, this is just sort of a bucket of stuff that we didn't fully understand or aren't sure if it's necessary for 6.0, really mostly unimportant. This is where everything will land beta.3, that ultimately will end up landing in beta.3, so we just put everything into that milestone, so we're tracking all the work for release appropriately. And then 6.0.0, this is sort of the more amorphous one. Right now, this really is sort of a nice to have to a what we're right now. A lot of the 6.0 stuff we actually do not expect to land, but we're sort of understanding that in real time as well. So again, like Steve said, if you don't see something here that you think needs to be here, please CC us and let us know, and we will triage that appropriately. Are you keeping an eye on the chat for me?
Oh, I will. Yes.
That would be awesome. So I just see it flashing orange, and I don't want to change over there if there's nothing there. Okay, and for those of you still submitting pull requests, thank you. That's awesome. We really appreciate it. So now the sort of fun stuff. We've been making quite a bit of progress on the RFC space. So the RFCs, for those of you that don't know, are review for comment documents, where we get community feedback on basically like specs for new designs. So one of those that I think we meant to vote on yesterday, but didn't get formally accepted yet, was this one on file encodings. So this was highly contentious issue. Everybody, thank you for all your feedback here. This was awesome. But basically, we have a very random smattering of default encodings for our various commandlets. So depending on which commandlet you're using, sometimes the types of these things would even be different. Some of them take strings, some of them take this file system commandlet provider encoding. The validate sets were all different and managed individually. It was kind of a mess. So what we decided to do, after a lot of feedback from you guys, is come up with this PS default encoding variable that's built-in variable for PowerShell. You basically set this thing, and it will change the default encoding for all of these commandlets simultaneously. The other big breaking change that we made here is that on Windows platforms, Linux platforms, this was easy to decide to make the default UTF-8 without a bomb. But we decided to make that the default on Windows as well to try and move the platform forward to being more consistent with non-Windows platforms. For those of you that don't know about a bomb, it's basically just it's a 1 byte mark at the front of the file that it is 2 bytes. 2 byte mark at the beginning of the file that indicates
big endian, little endian.
Yeah, which is basically big endian, little endian, which is basically useless on UTF-8, and so Linux and the rest of the world has never really put bombs on UTF-8 files. So we're just going to do the same. But this does mean if you have any scripts that are depending on the default encoding behavior, that you should use the dash encoding parameter to be more explicit when you want a deterministic behavior. What this does fix is the, I'm blanking on the name. What's this operator, Bruce? The redirection operator, thank you. The redirection operator is actually just using outfile under the hood. So we now are fully compatible with the redirection operator on Linux.
Right. To emphasize what Joey was saying, we're talking about adding a script analyzer rule that everywhere you do something that where you could specify an encoding, the rule will say you must specify an encoding.
Or you should.
I think probably you should.
Should when yeah.
That's the debate.
The thing is, you're going to get this error or this warning out of script analyzer saying, please specify the encoding. And there was some concern that if you say currently, if you use the current enum value for default, you'll get the wrong answer because it's not the same on Linux and Windows.
Yeah, and so there's a set of these values that, because we're essentially using the pass-through values of system.encoding from .NET, we've got a couple of these values like default, legacy, OEM, and unknown that are basically useless and that are only there for legacy reasons. And so we will have an issue that will be opened to talk about whether or not we want to include those as encoding parameter values, because in many cases they're kind of useless. I think OEM might be the exception there, but we can certainly we can talk about that.
And
That ends up being a specific IBM thing.
people should also be aware that this is a breaking change, that we're changing the default encoding on Windows for some of our utilities, but not all of them, so that we'll have a uniform experience across Linux and Windows. And the net result should be a better experience overall, because there's a lot of things that don't deal properly with Unicode encoded files, or things with byte order marks in it. So the net result is everything should just work better. But if you have things that are very encoding specific, they may break.
Yeah, so for instance, UTF-16 files that were created from new module manifest cannot be properly read by the diff tool that's used in Git, right? Which means that it was being treated as a binary file. So things like this are sort of where Windows felt like a lesser citizen in many ways than Linux, and so we're trying to snap to those across the board. You want to add anything?
I think I've added everything.
Pretty much covers it. Okay. Yeah, so this one, again, this was like huge shout out to all the people involved on this one. It was like pages and pages and pages. It took me hours really to triage all that feedback, which we really appreciate.
This is a good example of good community engagement.
Yeah. Yeah, this guy here was just phenomenal. I mean, it's taking a while to load here because of just how much awesome stuff. Okay, we can pat ourselves in the back later.
You want to talk about the change to
Before we move off of that, so I think we do expect the PR for the encoding work to happen for hopefully beta 3, but it might be tight. It may not show up till beta 4.
You already play tapes and emails. 17. Yeah, no, you did merge that guy. Okay, so that is the latest one that we. Yeah. So you wanted to talk about the default shell one?
No, the change to how arguments are processed in PowerShell.exe that we talked about today.
Yes. Do we have that anywhere that I can pull anything up?
You can look at the shebang, but I can just talk about. I have a PR that I'm just finishing up the testing because apparently a bunch of tests are expecting the previous default behaviors that they just fix all those. What Bruce is bringing up is there's a broader discussion which I don't want to get into right now, which is how far do we want to go in terms of compliance with POSIX like shells. You could open that one. It's really just a subset of that. So recently there was an issue that that Jeffrey Snover actually found, where if you use the shebang feature, which if you're not familiar with that, basically on Unix, if you have a text file and you put the #bang in front, then the OS knows, okay, this is a script and I just got to find who the interpreter is and pass the script to the interpreter and the magic happens and stuff like that. So in the PowerShell case, if you don't have a PS1 extension, then the OS will still execute PowerShell and pass this file, and then PowerShell sees this file and sees it's executable and says, hey, this is just a native command. I'm going to pass it back to the OS, and the OS passes it back to PowerShell, and basically sticking this recursive loop. So I made a PR previously that turned out not to be the right way to fix it, and we had this discussion, all right, the right way to fix it really is probably to change the syntax or semantics in PowerShell.exe so that instead of command being the positional parameter, it should be file, which is consistent with other shells on Unix. And this kind of solves certain things. It is a breaking change. I expect to have that PR submitted today. I'm just doing some final testing. But that is a potential big breaking change. But in most cases that I've seen, people are using a -C for command anyway, so that they won't be impacted by that. But basically, if you do PowerShell foo, then instead of foo being treated as a command, it's being treated as a file.
Right, so right here I'm doing PowerShell get process, and that actually runs get process. But in the new world, it would look for
a file called get process.
A file called get process and try to execute it as a script.
It won't find it out.
But like Steve said, I think most people are doing this or this, which will continue to work just as you'd expect. So this is a breaking change. We like to think that the behavior is limited. I heard somebody popping on the thing. Oh, we got tons of stuff in the chat here.
Sorry. How did I start? I wasn't watching that.
No, did somebody want to comment on that there? So just backtracking on questions real quick, we had one from Eugene on, does the job run with the environment captured of the launching environment?
It captures the variables that are referenced in the command, except for things that are process specific. It doesn't capture functions, but it does capture variables. So there's essentially an implicit dollar using on all of the variables that you're using in the expression.
Awesome, +1s for UTF-8 no bomb. Thanks, guys. Darwin, to answer your question right now, yes. The thinking there is that we're really trying to. There's a balance between leaving Windows PowerShell in a way that it won't break the long tail of existing scripts on Windows and being consistent with PowerShell Core. And unfortunately, this is one of those things where we want to leave the defaults the same on Windows PowerShell.
Okay, just to be clear, currently Windows PowerShell, we're really only taking critical fixes. So a lot of stuff we're talking about should not affect, and particularly for that reason, for compatibility, it won't affect existing usage of Windows PowerShell.
More agreement on UTF-8 no bomb. Sounds like we did the right thing there. Hate to admit this, but I didn't even know PowerShell.exe took positional params. Always specify command or file. That's kind of how.
Good practice.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing as well.
There's only one positional params, by the way, which is if you don't provide a parameter, then it treats the rest of that arguments as a command previously, and now it treats it as a file. And if there's anything that follows after that file, those are arguments passed to that script.
So this is it time to consider a distinct name for the PowerShell core binary versus Windows PowerShell?
We've talked about that.
We had long conversations about exactly this, and ultimately we decided to keep the name the same.
I think that's one where I think it'd be great to have more community feedback.
Yeah, I think we'd like an issue discussing this because there really is an extremely long tail of pros and cons, and there's also a number of names that you wouldn't expect that are already squatted on throughout the GNU Linux ecosystem, BSD, Unix, all those. So yeah, it'd have to be something that we do right, and I think it'd probably end up being an alias, like, right, to PowerShell dot.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's where we should have that discussion.
Yeah, we should have that discussion.
Never close on what it should be called. And like Posh is one of the front runners.
Posh is one of the front runners. I think there's the something object shell, the POSIX object shell or something like that.
There is technically a Posh shell today, but it seems like it's not heavily used. So
it's true. After the curl thing, we're a little touchy though on all that stomping on names of other stuff.
Personally, I would not have a problem calling it Monad, but that is also doesn't end with an SH. So hey.
Yeah, we should have an issue. So if anybody really wants to fire that one up, we can do that. I assume it'll throw out an appropriate error file not found on the console if you do pass in a command. Yes.
To answer Glenn's question, it works basically the same as if you dash file X, and you'll get an appropriate error today.
Yeah.
Whether it's not a script or whether it doesn't exist.
Oh, busted! I'm running beta 1.
Oh, come on.
Start process, yeah, so if I do like PowerShell-file foo.ps1, yeah, system cannot find the file. Regarding an operator, so the job is a traditional out-of-proc job instead of an in-process run space job?
Correct.
Correct.
Which maybe that's a good time to bring up the RFC that Bruce has already published, right, the concurrency. So that is using run spaces.
Yeah, but that's addressing a different...
That's addressing a different problem, but just to set expectation, that's not something we're blocking 6004, it's more targeted for 61. But it's a good time to provide feedback on that, but I'm not sure how much feedback you've gotten on that, Bruce, to be honest.
There's a fair amount of feedback on it.
So Eugene says 2 different names means we can have both live side-by-side on Windows with no conflicts or ambiguity. That is both the pro and the con, the major pro and con. They're bigger fish to fry than changing the PowerShell binary name. Agreed. We will come back to it. I think we'll have to, but yeah. Do that with a version parameter? No. Yes, you can, and that might be one of the things that we want to.
Version parameter.
Yes, but we have to extend it to be aware of PowerShell Core or PowerShell Core installations.
So our
we've gone
current
that road.
story for side-by-side, even side-by-side different versions of PowerShell Core 6, is that the way you differentiate it is the path.
Right.
We've also talked in depth about having a version manager, and we decided against it at this point in time.
Yeah, so there's a symlink in user local bin to the current version of PowerShell.
Yes.
But you can have multiple versions of PowerShell side by side.
And we have an open issue on the Windows side for something similar where we have a symlink pointing to the latest version.
Yeah.
We haven't, I don't believe we call that high priority. It's like, it's a nice to have. And so we do it manually.
Yes. Keith says maybe PowerShell needs a version manager, PSVM select 6.1. This is like, it's almost inevitable that we will have to do something like that, and yet we are resisting heavily because it's such a nasty can of worms.
I think so here's the thing is I think right now it probably isn't completely necessary because PS Core 6 and Windows PowerShell are distinct enough. In the future, if we have 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, our goal is to maintain compatibility, so you should be able to use the latest 6X and be happy with that because since we're following semantic versioning, if we really have a big breaking change, then we would call it a 7X. And my hope is we never have to go to 7 because we maintain.
So get all the breaking changes into 6.
That's why we're, making some of the bigger changes now because it's going to be much harder to make it in the future.
Trevor made a comment about these discussions, whether this is being discussed openly or internally in Microsoft, pointing to public discussions on pros, cons. I will say that these discussions all took place before we went out and we sort of had our high level goals and discussions about what we wanted to accomplish with the first rev of an open source PowerShell. So in many ways, like these conversations just got very hairy very quickly, and so we ended up kind of just deferring a lot of this stuff. It's like we as you said, Trevor, we have bigger fish to fry in terms of just getting PowerShell to be usable enough cross-platform, and so. A lot of that stuff isn't written down and was just sort of heat of the moment conversations and meetings, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think ultimately, if these conversations start happening again, they have not yet. But if they do, we would codify all that formally. I think they will have to again at some point in the future. Wow, too many problems to deal with. Let's worry about that later. Simple recommended way to invoke PowerShell Core cross-platform. If a build script in an open source project must have predictable UTF-8 output on Linux and Windows. So I think there's a couple questions in there. One of those is like, how do I get to PowerShell Core? So we, I think that might...
remotely or locally? Because locally, if it's installed, you should just run, well, on Linux, you just run PowerShell. I guess on Windows, you'd have to give...
But in terms of the predictability of UTF-8 output, that would be specified in the script. So you would want to make sure to use the -encoding parameter to get predictable output everywhere. Thomas is down to changing the name of the binary, plus to adding a min ver max ver require ver param or launching. Yeah, so again, there's a million ways we could do that, but we want to make sure that 6 is nailed down first before we start figuring all that out. Desktop core different enough when I simply say PowerShell RFC, I would like to have some predictability. Yeah, agreed. We definitely capture the functional requirement there. Speaking of breaking changes, I'd like to add the Unicode escape sequence PR to the agenda towards the end. Low risk breaking change would be nice to get into 6.0. Yep, we can definitely do that. I'm taking a note here.
I think that one will show up in the 6.0. I don't know if it will show up in 6.0 beta 3. Depends on if that gets merged in time.
Yeah, but we can just talk about his PR, make sure we're unblocked. Everyone's unblocked there.
But I just want to clarify, like any outstanding PRs that are submitted by the community, like if it gets merged in time, even if it's not marked as a high priority item, will show up in the 6.0 product.
Yes.
So we're not holding any of those for future type of thing.
Which I think Keith knows, but yeah, just to clarify to everyone. Huge issue to me is lack of semantic versioning for dependencies in PowerShell module manifests. Love to see this breaking change in 6.0.
We have that issue still to complete that work.
The semantic versioning work? Yeah,
I think
so
that's marked as high priority.
So that the semantic versioning work is a can of worms that we totally need to open and haven't yet. I will say there's a number of other RFCs I still want to look at real quick that we're still drilling down. But that's one that you're definitely right. We need to write sooner rather than later and make sure we get enough time to get feedback. The module manifest thing is really hard because the fact that we do strict validation on all the older versions, and we want people to be able to make modules that work down to 3. Obviously, that's hard to do when you're trying to add features to module. Yeah, but I still think we need to have some kind of support in there and some kind of story. So agreed.
Does this mean you want to be able to specify like alpha, beta in the version field of the manifest?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that far.
That's what I was afraid of.
we never. I don't think we ever talked about that.
That's why I wanted to make bring it up as a specific point.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my point is you should be able to declare a dependency within required modules that specifies a semantic version. So, if I have a particular version of let's say a cloud module, for example, that has a certain command that was introduced in a certain version of that module, then I need to be able to specify that version as a dependency.
Yeah, and you can specify versions as a dependency today, but you can't specify version 1.2.3.alpha.
Well, but what about greater than? Is greater than supported?
That should still work.
We have minver and maxver.
The comparison basically doesn't even look at the whatever that last field with the text is.
Yeah, but I think the way we parse those fields is we convert them into a version.
We have a semantic version class.
We do. Okay,
Yeah,
so we've
we
changed
have
that.
our own implementation.
Okay, and if that's being changed in modules, then that should actually work.
We convert normal system versions to
This guy.
because it's a subset.
Right.
And I guess there's a kind of a second issue here too, which is one you have module dependencies, but then if you're building a module that is wrapping or depending on NuGet packages, then you need some mechanism to declare NuGet package dependencies as well.
Yeah, so this is another big one for sure, and you've got the native dependency problem as well, which Joel has brought up a couple times, and we still definitely have on the radar. I will say that we have a bit of a sequencing in mind right now. Just if we could take a step back, I think we've captured the functional thing there, Trevor. But from a sequencing perspective, so we've got, as many of you know, and I showed off last time, we have CDXML commandlets working for a while. We broke them, I think, in beta 2 with the .NET Core bug that got fixed, and they will be fixed again in beta 3. The other thing that we're trying to get into beta 3, and we're hoping that this lands, is kind of a big one. Did Aditya submit this yet?
Yeah, it's live. Let's look for author.
Yeah, so this looks a little innocuous, but is potentially one of the biggest deal PRs that we have coming for a while. Basically, it will allow DLLs to get loaded from well-known locations in .NET Core that are Windows PowerShell DLLs. So what this allows me to do is things like, if I were to say add System32 Windows PowerShell v1 modules to my module path, I could do an import module Hyper-V, and here it fails because we're on beta 1, it'll fail on beta 2, but with his PR it will actually succeed, and get VM will just work, which is, this is what I have to, oh, I see, because they do their version directories. Why is that? Can't type. Is there really not a Hyper-V there? Oh, no, there's not. I don't have Hyper-V installed on this machine. Hilarious. Okay, but needless to say, you can do that, and because we are Net Standard 2.0 compliant with the Core 2.0 run space, then we load all those DLLs and we know where to go look for them. So what we're going to ask when this is released is for all of you to install the latest version of PowerShell 6 and start running, add System32 to your PS module path, or your Windows PowerShell program files module path to your PowerShell Core module path, and start running your favorite scripts. Just find out if they work. We actually expect a whole ton of them to just work with this fix. And from there, we want to draw a hard line in the sand that we are, with the validation that shows that those work. We want to say PowerShell Core is the future, and that we can run legacy workloads on it, and that we are fully going down that path.
And just so no one's surprised, once we start going down the validation path that we can actually use full CLR Windows and third-party modules in PowerShell Core 6, we do plan to remove the full CLR code out of GitHub so that we have a much cleaner code base.
Yeah, so this is just something that we've been wanting to do for a long time, and especially the PMs on this side have been wary to remove a lot of that code because we wanted to have the ability to back out and do a Windows PowerShell edition of 6.0 if we absolutely had to. We haven't been building it for a while. We haven't been testing it at all, and ultimately we don't want to do it because we think that Core is the future and we want everybody to move towards that. So all of that was dependent on validation, internal Windows modules, a bunch of stuff on the gallery, just basically finding out how far Net Standard 2.0 was going to get us. With all of that in mind, as Steve said, we want this validation to succeed so that we can go delete a bunch of old code that isn't relevant to PowerShell Core. So there's a reported issue with assembly load context a couple calls ago. Does this fix that issue? Is getting a silent failure when loading a netcore assembly using the default load context. The assembly load context is being changed significantly. So this is sort of, again, I want to talk about this sort of path and where we're going and how we're staging this out. But Net Standard, so we did Net Standard 2.0 with Beta 1. We're being able to load from the GAC with Beta 3. And we want everyone to smoke test their stuff. After that, we want to get in what we're calling the PowerShell standard, which is the big PR we have here. It's very similar to Net Standard. That would basically say, hey, for your C# applications and commandlets, if you target this assembly, you will work with PowerShell 3 through 6 across full and core CLR. And that is right here, groundwork for PowerShell standard. This is taking a while because it's a massive 11,000 line PR, but we do want to get this out for Beta 4. And at that point in time, we want to give very formal, strong guidance on how someone hosts PowerShell Core in their own application, which I think is what you're trying to do, Trevor. So yeah, this is that's the goal is basically that you target this assembly. It's Net Standard 2.0 compatible, and then you build all your code as Net Standard, and then there's some questions about shim assemblies for down-level platforms and where those should live and whether module authors should ship that thing or what. But essentially, that's all going to hopefully be solved by Beta 4 or maybe Beta 5 timeframe. But the point is that we want to have a strong developer story that gives you guys some lead time to start validating that you can build real projects in C# against PowerShell. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, then we can definitely answer some quick questions here. But ultimately, I know that we need to write some blogs and some documentation to talk about this. So we'll get there. Cool. I know. I want one other call to action on a PowerShell RFC that I'd love some feedback on that I just published. It's very lightweight. We just want to. That's the issue. So this guy, PowerShell Core installer / utility module. So this is just a brief RFC on a module that we might ship in the gallery that would.
Make it easier to install.
Make it easier to install PowerShell.
On Windows.
On Windows, yes. So right now, package managers are great on Linux. We don't have the same thing on Windows. And so we want to build some wrapper commandlets that will grab the MSIs and make them easier to update and also to register that endpoint. So you can do things like this invoke command where you install PowerShell Core across your domain. So yeah, we're trying to make these things easier. Similarly, the keep your eyes peeled for the startup configuration RFC that's going to get updated quite a bit, which is essentially a file that we want to place into the root of PS Home that will
or in your user folder.
Or in your user folder, yes. Yeah, it's a complicated dealio, but basically you need to be able to set some configuration values in PowerShell before PowerShell loads. This is probably not what it's going to look like, or definitely not what it's going to look like. So we keep your eyes peeled on this RFC for an update, because we're going to have one of those soon. Any news to share about including PowerShell Remoting out of the box with the PowerShell Core install package? So again, are you talking about...
Presumably talking about WSMan.
I think you're talking about WSMan server side on Linux?
I guess I'm not sure if it's SSH or if it's WSMan or what, but basically just including the OMI, the necessary OMI packages, and the PSRP package to basically enable PowerShell remoting out of the box, so you don't have to install something separate.
Yeah, so SSH-based remoting requires no separate dependencies, and we have, I think Paul Higginbotham right now is writing
on it right now.
Yeah, so he's working on a commandlet enable SSH remoting. Yeah, that would make it easier for you to set up SSH-based remoting out of the box.
And I think we're going to leverage Darwin's work on getting OpenSSH installed on Windows.
Yeah, so we're talking to Darwin right now, who's on the call. He's done an awesome OpenSSH installer that works with and without Chocolatey for installing SSH on Windows. So we're trying to figure out how to do something similar to this sort of install PowerShell Core module with OpenSSH, make that easier to deploy on the Windows side. We may also make OMI easier to deploy on the Linux side. I mean, right now, I think you just have to install both the OMI. If you want WSMan-based remoting on your Linux servers, you just install OMI and
PSL My Provider.
The PSL My Provider, and I believe that those are both Linux packages, so you can do all of that from packages.microsoft.com. We ship all of those things, and then you just have to make sure that OMI is running. So we certainly, I know that I need to document that a little bit better. Unfortunately, no one else is really asking for that besides you, Trevor. But the SSH-based remoting is definitely going to get easier there as well. So hopefully, if that doesn't fulfill your functional needs, then we can still talk and I can get all that WSMan stuff up. I wanted real quick to address Keith Hill. You said you had a PR here. I just want to make sure that's unblocked.
Yeah, 3958.
3958.
Yeah.
3939.
Up. There we go.
Now maybe what?
There it is. Yeah, 2958 was another one. Implement Unicode escape parsing. Yes. Let me just see where this is blocked right now.
And the breaking change that's referred to here, as Jason pointed out, that some people have used obfuscation techniques where they will use backtick in front of characters. So since U wasn't reserved before, it now is different behavior. You don't get U back, you'll get either an error back if the following digits aren't, appropriate sequence.
So it might break malware is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, I think I remember. Go ahead.
I would say the main thing here is that when I originally wrote the corresponding issue up, which is 2751, it was to add support for backtick and backtick U. And at that point, it's like, this is probably not complex enough to be worth writing up an RFC. My original thinking was just to mimic C#'s backslash lowercase u, 4 hex digits, and maybe backslash uppercase u followed by 8 digits. And as we got discussing it, it kind of morphed. And what it morphed into was 2 forms. And I just wanted to make sure that the committee was okay with that. And I'll post to the chat window what those 2 forms look like. One is sort of the nod to C# and Bash, both of which take lowercase u followed by a fixed width 4 hex digits, and then you can have additional characters right next to it, and it just kind of works. And then the other one was we got several requests to support astral plane characters, i.e. emoji, and those can't be represented with a 4 hex digit sequence. So we adopted a JavaScript style variable with Unicode escape sequence that allows you to specify between 1 and 6 hex digits, which then allows you to specify emoji characters.
Interesting.
Yep.
That's cool. That's cool. I'm going to throw the review committee label on this here just so that we take a look at it, but I don't see anything wrong with this. I mean, it's it just seems like a good thing to do. I appreciate you putting the PR together, Keith.
Sure.
I know there is a small but vocal and growing minority of folks that are really excited about emoji in PowerShell, which I think is actually pretty cool. But
that's pretty cool.
yeah, a lot of other console hosts do emoji better than conhost.exe.
And I think Joel's got that set of Powerline fonts, and they stick heart symbols and stuff like that in their prompts.
Yes.
I've seen more than one I heart PS.
Yeah.
Prompts.
It's cool though. I like it. It. It's awesome. Yeah. So this just makes it easier. Then you just take, or my favorite new emoji is the shrug. That's a good one. You get the long character codes off Emojipedia. All right. Enough about emoji. But yeah, this is great, Keith. Thank you.
Okay. Right, thanks.
Make sure we got the two Unicode forms. Yep, we got those emojis. PowerShell module. It's on the gallery. Sweet. So you'll have to update it to support this new backtick format, Trevor. All right. Does anyone else have anything for us that they'd like to talk about? Before I forget, there is one thing I want to plug, which is the Azure PowerShell community stand-up is just after ours. I should have had a link handy, but I wonder if they reposted this on Azure. Does anyone happen to have a link or details about when that's going on? I know that Trevor probably cares a lot. Community stand-up? Nope. Well, it's happening. And I wish I had a link to it. That was handier, but I might have to open Outlook.
I think if we find it, maybe we can just add it to our community called README, just as a FYI.
Yes, we absolutely should. Nope. Well, I will try and get that link before this call is over. By the way, big +1 to whoever fixed the PS reline bug that was causing garbage characters to be displayed in the prompt on Linux. I don't know who fixed that one, but yes, +1 to them too. Great that you want to make PowerShell rather quality rather than data-driven, but how can we have an update for each beta version? How many more beta versions are roughly expected until RTM? Do you want to speak to that, Steve?
Hold on, what was it? Oh, it's on the PS reline. I'm wondering if it was a change I made or not. But
the quality-driven versus the date-driven.
So at least what I'm having the team prioritize right now. So we're fixing a lot of the issues. We're going to end up fixing all the issues marked as 600 high priority. I've kind of allocated time for the team to actually focus on test coverage, probably like August, September timeframe, because that's something that we definitely need to know before we can actually declare a release candidate. And we're need to get our code coverage work back up. I think that there is work happening already, so we can start relying. Because once we moved to core CLR 2.0, it broke the code coverage tools. I think we almost have that fixed. So after that, we're going to start producing some guidance. So hopefully the community can help us as well on where we think we need to prioritize our test coverage, so that we actually would. Our target is to have 80% code coverage. But again, the interesting part of code coverage is not what we have covered, but really understanding what we don't have covered and making a call on whether or not that's acceptable. So that's kind of where we are. So yes, so our drive for the release candidate is really based on two uber factors. One is getting the 600 high priority issues resolved, and the other one is having sufficient test coverage so that we know that we can iterate faster once we get past 6.0 to 6.1 and maintain a high quality bar, versus having a traditional have a lot of code churn, quality goes down, and then have a long tail to fix those issues. Like, we don't want to go through that. Oh,
Yeah.
in terms of expected RTM. So we don't have like a formal date. I think I'll speak personally. I'm trying to target like a fall release candidate. And I think we're maybe a little bit optimistic that we can hit by end of this calendar year. But certainly sometime in the fall would be great. But there's no hard date, so definitely we're trying to do more like a quality-driven release rather than a pure date-driven release. I think it'd be great if we can get it out by end of this year for sure, so then people can start taking dependencies on it and we can move towards 6.1.
Yeah, we know that people want this, and we know that to ship is to choose and all of that good stuff. So, we want to get to a certain level of quality, as Steve said, with the testability, and really make sure that we're not putting out something that's half baked. But at the same time, we released our first alpha in August, and we understand that over a year is a long time to wait for these sorts of things. So, we're trying to do our best to balance between those two. But I certainly, I think we have a good plan to drive towards the end of the year, hopefully, and we'd like to be able to commit to that more firmly as time goes on. It's just to catch up. Last thing, cannot contain any VT. Oh, you guys are talking about the VS readline fix still. Yeah, I don't know that the VS Code integrated terminal is fixed. I think that was actually a problem with console host in Windows if you're using insider builds. If you're talking about the whole ANSI or ASCII thing that you have to put in your VS Code profile, that's what that was. +1. I'm not sure the source of the issue. Thanks for the info. Using VS Code on a Mac. Oh, interesting. Then I don't know. Hopefully, there's an issue for that in the VS Code PowerShell repo. So that's getting tracked. I'm still trying to. I was on my phone trying to pull up this community stand-up, and I have a Skype invite for it, but I'm not seeing the stand-up. Let's try Twitter. The link hasn't been posted yet. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, you guys know what time it is, right? It's at 10:30. Hopefully that's according to Roni's Twitter. Oh man, that's where I was going. You guys are good. Link to come. Oh, okay, perfect. Well, cheers, Trevor. Thank you so much for joining. We always appreciate the help. I think we're gonna give you guys back 10 minutes, unless you have something else you'd like to raise. Any high priority bugs, stuff blocking you guys. Version, they're not blocking you. You're so interested in getting. Yes, please.
If they still repro, then we definitely want to know about it.
This was a PS readline issue. Oh no! It opened Chrome.
Oh, you should probably.
But it didn't restore all my tabs. That's good. Should probably stop sharing my screen immediately. Is that what you're gonna say?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't like Chrome notifications coming up. They don't snooze with the rest of my snoozes. So this guy, multi-line prompt incorrectly displays the last line. Yeah, you know what? This one is like old as dirt. I remember getting this one on. Oh, it's hitting on 5.1 too. Interesting.
Oh, so it's probably
Yeah, I think this one's probably a lower priority for us at this point, unfortunately. Yes, Chrome is slow to start up, and it's a memory hog, but it's got all my extensions and my bookmarks and my things. Anyway, yes, thank you. Oh, you were pointing that at Trevor anyway. But yeah, Christoph, please file those if you've got them. All right, guys. Thanks again. If you've got any questions, concerns, feel free to file issues. It doesn't have to be a bug to file an issue. I know that's what the template looks like, but if you just want to get a conversation going, feel free to just ask a question or whatever you want in issues. So hope to see you there. See you there soon. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.